They didn't name her, they branded her. Born in a palace but never granted a crown, she wasn't royalty, she was a replacement, a decoy, a designed creature wrapped in elegance and silence, sent as punishment for a crime she never committed. To them, she was a genetic weapon, disposable, silent, beautiful, only because it made her easier to control. So they gave her to a human expecting chains, obedience, and consummation under law. But what they never expected was that he would kneel. "You're not my prisoner," he said. "You're the first person they couldn't break, and I won't be the one who does." She was engineered to obey, but he taught her to choose. She was never meant to carry life. But now, she carries the child of the only man who saw her for who she truly was. And when they came to erase her, she stood between their bullets and his heart and chose to forget everything except what her soul refused to surrender. Because in the end, she wasn't their weapon. She was his queen. The procession moved with haunting silence through the crystalline corridors of the Valyrian Hall of Judgment. At the center, bound in shimmering star-silver chains, walked a young woman with twilight blue skin, her head bowed but not from shame. Her name was Kaelin, a palace servant, not royalty. No one knew her real identity. She was never meant to stand trial in place of Princess Zara Cathara. But when the real princess fled on the eve of her sentencing, Kaelin had been chosen forced to wear the crown's disgrace. Her hands trembled inside the restraints, but not from fear. Number fear had passed days ago. What filled her now was cold resignation. High Chancellor Morvick stood atop the dais, robes flowing like molten obsidian, his voice slicing the air. For treason against the Valyrian Empire harboring insurgents, aiding enemies, and undermining imperial commandus, Princess is hereby stripped of all status and shall be delivered to bonded servitude. Gasps filled the chamber, not because of the sentence, but because of who she was to be bonded to. Captain Marcus Vale, of the human colonial fleet. The crowd fell dead silent. A human. The lowest possible fate for Valyrian nobility. But Kaelin wasn't noble. She wasn't even supposed to be here. She glanced toward the balcony where Empress Lyrae watched from behind a veil of indifference. The Empress had to know. That wasn't her daughter standing there, but she let it happen. They needed a sacrifice. Kaelin was disposable. As she was led away, the chains heavy on her wrists, Kaelin's thoughts spiraled. She had always served in the shadows changing bedsheets, sweeping the crystal floors of the lunar gardens. She had seen Zara's cruelty, her secrets, and her cowardice. If I must suffer for her sins, Kaelin whispered to herself, then I'll do so on my terms. The transport shuttle was already waiting. Its hull bore Terran insignias, stark and angular against the elegance of the Valyrian court. The guards pushed her forward without ceremony. As the hatch closed behind her, she caught her reflection on the metal wall, her eyes, bright with fire. This was not how her life was meant to go. But fate, it seemed, had chosen her for a story not even the stars could have written. And the human? She would meet him soon enough. The bonding chamber aboard the Terran vessel Stellar Dawn was smaller than Kaelin had imagined. Estral, practical, nothing like the ornate trial halls of Valyria. The door hissed open, and two Valyrian escorts shoved her forward without a word. Her wrists still bore faint marks from the star-silver chains, though they had long since been removed. Inside the chamber, a single man stood waiting. He wasn't what she expected. Captain Marcus Vale stood tall, arms behind his back, posture more diplomatic than dominant. His Terran uniform was crisp but lived in, dark navy with silver trim that glinted softly in the sterile light. His face bore no cruelty, just a quiet calculation. And something else. Surprise. He was staring at her, not with hunger, not with disgust, but with confusion. "You're not what I expected," he said calmly. Kylan blinked. She had prepared herself for brutality, humiliation, control, but not curiosity. "Nor are you," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Is this how humans welcome their new property?" Marcus's jaw clenched slightly at the word. He stepped forward but kept a respectful distance. "I don't agree with this arrangement," he said. "I didn't ask for it, but the fleet approved the bond, and your empire insisted." Kaylin tilted her head, studying him. He didn't look like a man drunk on power, more like someone carrying too much of it. "Then why accept?" she asked. "Because declining would have meant war. Or worse, someone else getting you. Someone who wouldn't care what you want, or what you are." Her heart skipped. Was that pity in his voice? Or strategy? "You believe I'm a princess," she said slowly, watching his eyes for any flicker of doubt. "Aren't you?" he asked. For a moment, Kaylin nearly confessed. The truth pressed against her throat like a scream, but something stopped her. No one had ever given her a choice. Not the Empress, not the court, not fate. But this human was asking, and so she lied again. "I was," she whispered. "Now I'm nothing." Marcus studied her in silence for a beat too long. Then, turning to the console near the wall, he tapped a few commands. A door to her right hissed open. "You'll stay in here," he said. "Separate quarters. You'll find everything adjusted to Valyrian, standard humidity, temperature, even the starlight frequency." Kaylin stared at him. "Why treat me like a guest?" He looked at her then, not with strategy, not with pity, but with something close to defiance. "Because no one deserves to be treated like cargo." A beat of silence. "And because maybe you're not the only one forced into a role you didn't choose." As he turned to leave, Kaylin caught herself watching the way he moved, not with the arrogance of a conqueror, but the caution of a man who'd been burned before. For the first time, she wondered, maybe this wasn't a sentence. Maybe it was an opportunity. 3 days into her life aboard the Stellar Dawn, Kaylin had memorized every hallway, every curve of the corridors, every pattern of footsteps from the crew. The ship felt quiet, suspiciously peaceful, and that unsettled her more than open hostility. No one questioned her presence, at least not out loud. They called her Princess. But in every reflection in steel walls, in polished control panels, Kaylin saw a lie. A servant girl clothed in silence and fear, walking halls that didn't belong to her. Only Captain Vale looked at her without the weight of the title, and that made him harder to read than anyone else. She stood now in the botanical bay, hands gently grazing the edge of a Terran growing pod filled with green vines pulsating faintly under grow lights. The plants were strange and nothing like the crystalline flora of Valyria, but beautiful in their own wild way. A voice broke the silence. "You've got a good touch." Kaylin turned sharply. A woman stood behind her early 40s, sharp features softened by curiosity. Her uniform bore the insignia of a science officer. Commander Jules Renna, the woman introduced. Xenobotanist, I've been watching you. Kylan straightened, masking her alarm behind a polite nod. You don't move like a politician, Renna added, walking toward the pod. You move like someone used to being invisible. Kalen's breath caught. I'm not sure I understand. Maybe I'm wrong, Renna said, glancing at her sideways. But I spent 10 years studying micro-expressions in alien mammals. I know a creature pretending not to flinch when I see one. Silence. Tension thick as fog. You're not her, are you? Kalen turned slowly, pulse spiking. Excuse me? You're not Princess Zara Cathara. It wasn't a question. For one terrifying heartbeat, Kalen considered running. But where would she go? A ship in deep space was a coffin with engines for those without cover. So instead, she did something else. She told a half-truth. She ran. On the day of her sentencing, I was told I could choose between death or wearing her disgrace. Renna didn't flinch, just listened, really listened. Why not tell the captain? Would it change anything? Kalen asked. The Empire sent a body. They didn't care who. I'm just easier to throw away. Renna exhaled deeply, as if processing the full weight of what Kalen had endured. Captain Vale's not like the others, she said finally. But you already know that, don't you? Kalen nodded, a flicker of something unspoken passing through her eyes. Then tell him soon, Renna added, because secrets aboard a ship this small tend to explode. That night, alone in her quarters, Kalen stood before the mirror again. No chains, no courtroom, no mask, but the lie clung to her skin like frost. She thought of Marcushi's steady voice, the way he never used her title, the quiet kindness he never explained. He deserved the truth. But would the truth destroy the only place she'd ever been treated like she mattered? She didn't know. All she knew was that the facade was cracking. And when it shattered, someone was going to bleed. The alert came just past the second sleep cycle. A shrill, pulsing tone cut through the silence of the stellar dawn, followed by red glyphs flickering across the ship's primary display. Unauthenticated communication Valyrian origin. Captain Marcus Vale was already in the command center by the time Kalen arrived, cloaked in a ship-issued robe. Her breath caught when she saw the hologram on the central deck. It wasn't her father. It wasn't an Imperial envoy. It was a human woman. Commander Isla Wren, Terran Intelligence Division, mid-30s. Raven black hair pulled into a regulation bun. Cold gray eyes that once softened only for Marcus. She didn't wait for introductions. Captain Vale, this is an encrypted recall. You're to stand down all diplomatic protocols immediately. The asset you've been assigned, Zara Cathares, a compromised individual. Kalen froze. Asset, not even prisoner. She was property to them. Still, Marcus's voice was low, sharp. Explain. Cross-referencing Valyrian judiciary leaks with Terran intercepts, we've confirmed that the woman on board your ship is not the real Princess Zara. Isla's expression was devoid of emotion. You've been harboring an imposter. Kylan stepped forward. No more hiding, no more pretending. It's true, she said. Silence hit the room like vacuum. Isla's gaze narrowed. Then we're done here. What does that mean? Marcus demanded. It means the political value of this arrangement has expired. The Empire wants her returned quietly. Alive is preferable, but not required. A task force is en route. Kalen's stomach dropped. You'd send people to kill me? Isla's tone didn't change. You're not a citizen, not a diplomat. You're a stolen identity wrapped in a fabrication. Your continued existence creates diplomatic liability. Marcus stepped forward now, voice hard. And what do you think happens when the Empire finds out we handed over a woman in good faith who turns out to be a victim of political substitution? Isla didn't flinch. That's why we're burying it. Quietly, cleanly. After the call ended, silence settled over the room. Kalen's chest was heaving, but her eyes were dry. So that's it? She said. One lie and I'm disposable again? Marcus was quiet, thinking. Then he turned, walking to the main console, hands flying across controls. What are you doing? She asked. Encrypting your identity, blocking incoming telemetry scans. I'm buying us time. Kaylin stepped closer, her voice a whisper. Why? He paused. Because you're not disposable. Because what they see as a problem, I see as a person. But I lied to you. And you were forced into it. I get it now. He looked at her, truly looked, and Kaylin realized this man hadn't just protected her. He'd believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. She loved you, didn't she? Kaylin asked softly. The woman on the screen. Marcus's shoulders tightened. Once. But she's not who I trusted with my soul. Not anymore. Kaylin reached out, her fingers brushing his. What do we do now? He looked down at her hand, small, alien, trembling, and covered it with his own. We run. But we don't run alone. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched into blinding streaks. But in the dim light of the bridge, two fugitives stood shoulder to shoulder, an ex-servant masquerading as a princess, and a human captain defying his orders for something far more dangerous than duty. The stellar dawn drifted in the outer orbit of a dead system, no sun, no life, just a dust belt surrounding a nameless rock. Marcus had 20 minutes before the Terran task force dropped out of hyperspace. They needed to vanish. Inside the auxiliary launch bay, he and Kaylin stood before the Orion-class skimmer, a two-seater exploration craft barely bigger than a shuttle pod. Its jump capacity was limited, no weapons, no cloaking, but it had one thing they needed: silence. This is insane, Kaylin said, voice shaking but resolute. It's our only option, Marcus replied, tossing a duffel of compressed rations into the storage bay. You're throwing away your command, your career. I'm throwing away nothing that hasn't already been taken, he cut her off, softer now. I made peace with that the moment I stood between you and a death warrant. Kaylin stepped into the skimmer's bay. As the hatch sealed shut behind them, the full gravity of the choice settled on both of them. They were fugitives now. And for the first time in her life, Kaylin wasn't running alone. 6 hours later, planetary descent. The skimmer broke through the cloud cover of a rogue world, a jungle-cloaked, storm-lashed planet, cataloged only as V13-6, long abandoned during colonial mapping. Its atmosphere was barely breathable, its wildlife undocumented. Perfect for hiding. The ship landed hard, skimming across a bog of bioluminescent moss, before settling between two ridge spines of jagged stone. Marcus powered down all systems. No signals, no trail. Only wind, and the strange, rhythmic hum of alien insects echoing through the vines. Kaylin stared out at the alien sky, two moons hanging low, their light painting her face in eerie silver. What happens now? She asked, arms folded. Now we survive, Marcus said. Then we figure out how to fight. Fight who? Both our governments? We're not warriors. No, he said quietly, but we are not theirs anymore either. That night, inside a makeshift shelter under the skimmer's wing, Kaylin lay curled on the thermal pad, her body wrapped in one of Marcus's jackets. Rain tapped the hull like an ancient drumbeat, but she couldn't sleep. Something was wrong. Her skin felt hot, not fevered, but active, pulsing with energy under the surface. She sat up, breathing heavy. Her reflection in the metallic bulkhead shimmered, and for a split second, she saw faint silver light tracing through the veins in her neck. She gasped, then stilled. It faded. Was it exhaustion? Stress? Mutation? She clutched her stomach. No pain, just a strange warmth. Like something inside her had begun reacting to this planet, or maybe to something much closer. Marcus stirred nearby. You okay? Kaylin hesitated. She wanted to lie. But this time, she didn't. Something's happening to me. He rose and crossed to her, crouching beside her with concern etched in every line of his face. What kind of something? She met his eyes. I don't know, but it started after we left orbit. After I touched you, it feels like something's waking up. Marcus's eyes searched hers, uncertain. Do you think it could be Valyrian biology reacting to, or something they put in me without telling me? Maybe they didn't just send me in Zara's place. Maybe I was always meant to become something else. Silence settled between them, but not the silence of fear. The silence of becoming. The jungle was awake before dawn. Alien vines quivered in the windless air. Bioluminescent spores drifted like snow, and strange animal cries echoed through the mist too rhythmic to be natural. Kylan sat by the edge of a shallow stream, sleeves rolled up, staring at the impossible. Her skin was glowing. Faint silver lines like calligraphy etched beneath the surface traced from her forearms to her collarbone. They shimmered softly, only visible when the alien moisture in the air touched her. It wasn't infection. It was language. Valyrian. Ancient, forbidden. She ran her fingers across one of the lines. A symbol flared under her touch. Seed of two sons. She trembled. Kalen, Marcus's voice called from behind. He sounded tired, wary. She didn't turn around. They lied to me, she said. They lied to both of us. What do you mean? She finally faced him, arms raised. This isn't random. This isn't a reaction. It's a design. Someone, Valyrian scientists, maybe altered me before I was ever sent to replace Zara. Marcus stepped closer, staring at the glowing script on her skin. What is that? Old Royal Codex. Genetic encryption. It's only supposed to be used for engineered lineages hybrids. Secret heirs, sacred vessels. Sacred what? Kalen exhaled shakily. I think I was meant to carry something, or become something. That's why they chose me. Not because I looked like Zara, but because I could survive what she couldn't. She looked up, her voice barely holding steady. Marcus, I think, I was designed to merge with someone. A pause. With you. The air between them turned heavy, like the jungle itself was holding its breath. Marcus knelt beside her, his eyes searching her fascinate with fear, but with aching clarity. You think they bred you to bond with a human? Not just bred, she whispered. Modified. Hidden among servants, tested in secret. I remember being sick as a child. I thought it was random. But now I see it. Every time I healed too fast. Every time I felt things others didn't, they were watching me. She clutched her chest. And now it's waking up, because of you. Marcus leaned back, stunned. Why me? Kalen looked at him, pain and wonder dancing in her eyes. Because you weren't supposed to love me. You were supposed to complete me. Marcus recoiled slightly, not from her but from the weight of what that meant. And if I hadn't treated you like a person, if I'd been like the others? Kalen's voice cracked. Then I would have become a weapon, or a womb. Silence, crickets clicking in the leaves. And then Marcus spoke, low and solemn. We need answers, real ones, not guesses, not whispers. He stood. There's an abandoned relay station 2 clicks east. Pre-war era, still has hardline uplink to off-grid Valyrian archives. It's a long shot, but if anyone hid files about this, it'll be there. Kylan nodded. Then we go. Tonight. As she stood, the last of the symbols faded beneath her skin like breath on glass. But something stayed behind. A quiet certainty. She wasn't an accident. She was a code. And Marcus? He wasn't just her protector anymore. He was the key. The abandoned Valyrian relay station stood like a fossilized skeleton among the jungle overgrowth, half buried in moss, vines piercing through shattered glass. The structure creaked with the weight of time, humming faintly with reserve power stolen from a decaying fusion core beneath its foundation. Kalen and Marcus stood in front of the main entrance, its once golden arch, now rusted to deep blood red. A faded sigil above the doorway still shimmered weakly in the dark. Dominion through harmony, a motto Kalen now understood was a lie. Inside, silence ruled. They moved cautiously, flashlights slicing through dust-laced air and tangled wires. Cracked terminals, broken screens. The ghosts of imperial bureaucracy haunted every hallway. Power grid still partially functional, Marcus murmured, scanning a panel. If we isolate the uplink channel, we might still access deep archives. Kalen stepped toward the central terminal, heart racing. The closer she got, the stronger the glow beneath her skin pulsed, like her body recognized the place. Her fingers brushed across the crystal-embedded interface. The screen lit up. No password. No resistance. Welcome, Subject UN-09. Marcus stared. An 09? Kalen's breath caught. Unison Project. 9th candidate. Her memories weren't returning, but her body knew. And now, the system did too. The archive unfolded before them, encrypted files, biological schematics, mission logs. Kalen's hands trembled as she scrolled through image after image. Children, test subjects, all with similar feature silver veins, Valyrian eyes with Terran bone structure, some barely alive, others marked as decommissioned. This isn't science, Marcus whispered. This is breeding, weapons manufacturing. They called it Project Unison, Kalen murmured. The Empire wanted hybrid vessels capable of surviving dimensional bleed fields and reproducing across species lines. To create a new dynasty, Marcus said, one that could conquer both galaxies. She looked at him. And I'm the only one that survived. Then the screen blinked. Incoming encrypted message. Terran Command Level 5. Clearance. Marcus's eyes narrowed. No way this station should receive active fleet transmissions. He accessed ITAN auto-forward cache buried in the station's buffer logs. And then, her face appeared. Commander Isla Wren. 2. Director Holt, Terran Command. UN-09, Code Black status. The imposter has triggered awakening. Subject is live, responsive, and bonded to Veil. Data confirms Project Unison has achieved partial success. Terminate the captain post-bonding. Extract the hybrid embryo for Phase 2. Kalen froze. Hybrid embryo? They planned this, Marcus said coldly. From the start, you were meant to be caught, meant to be given to someone kind, to activate the bond. Kalen stepped back, panic rising. I thought I escaped being used, but I walked into their hands. And now, she stopped. Her palm rested against her stomach. Her veins flickered silver. Marcus saw it, realized it. Kalen, are you? She looked up at Jaime, eyes wide, terrified, but certain. It's already begun. Silence. Not even the jungle moved outside. And then Marcus, eyes dark with rage, turned back to the screen. We're not running anymore. He yanked a portable drive from the terminal, copying everything: project logs, genetic codes, internal memos. If they come for you, for the child, they'll have to go through me. Kylan's voice was quiet. And if I become something I wasn't meant to be? Marcus looked at her, steady and certain. Then we rewrite what you were meant to be. Outside, above the treetops, 3 distant glints cut through the clouds. Terran ships. They were coming. The jungle screamed with motion. Dropships tore through the cloud line like burning arrows, thrusters lighting up the darkness in deep crimson. Trees flattened in circular patterns as the crafts descended into the valley, disturbing birds that had never known fire before. Inside the ruined relay station, Kalen stood frozen near the central terminal, watching the trajectory maps. They're coming straight for us, she said. Marcus slid a power cell into his pulse rifle. We have 15 minutes, maybe less. You can't win a war with one gun. I'm not planning to win, he said. I'm planning to make them bleed. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the hallway. We don't need to fight. There's still a way out. Kalen and Marcus both turned. Renathe, xenobotanist from Stellar Dawn, stood at the corridor's mouth. She wore no armor, just field fatigues and a strange calmness in her eyes. Kalen stepped forward, confused. Rena? How did you find us? I've been tracking the project since before you were born, Rena said softly. I worked with your genetic architect. I helped select the planetary templates for compatibility testing. You knew? Kalen's voice cracked. I knew you were more than a stand-in. I knew you weren't Zara, but you were perfect. Then why are you here with them? Rena hesitated. Because I believe in the future the project promised. Not control, balance, unity. You're the bridge, you and the child. Marcus stepped between them. And I'm guessing this future doesn't involve me. Rena's eyes dimmed. I'm sorry, Captain. You were always a means. Behind Rena, a shadow stepped into the light. Kalen's heart stopped. It was her. Her face. Her eyes. Her voice. But not her. The woman before them was Zarayor, what remained of her. Skin unnaturally smooth. Eyes a blank platinum white. Veins glowing steadily like exposed circuits. She moved like something no longer alive. UN-09, the clone intoned. You have deviated from original protocol. Kalen backed up instinctively. You're me. I am what you were meant to be, without emotion, without weakness, without him. Zara's gaze turned to Marcus. The asset has compromised the hybrid. Retrieval is now priority. Marcus raised the rifle. She's not going anywhere. Incorrect, Zara replied. She raised her hand and Rena stepped forward, aiming a concealed pulse blaster straight at Kalen. Step away from her, Marcus, Rena said, her voice trembling. Don't make me choose. Marcus's voice dropped, deadly. You already did. Kalen's pulse pounded in her ears. Her skin began to flicker again, symbols emerging faster, brighter than before. She's activating, Zara said. Her genetic code is rejecting the deviation. It's unstable. We must extract now. Kalen dropped to her knees, clutching her stomach. Marcus, she gasped. Something's burning. Zara and Rena moved forward. Marcus fired. The rifle barked once, striking Rena in the shoulder. She screamed and fell, stunned, but Zara didn't flinch. A force field shimmered around her as she stepped forward like a walking god. You are obsolete, she told Marcus. Maybe, he said. Then he grabbed a detonator from his belt. But I still write the ending. He slammed his hand against the emergency overload panel. The station's core began to wail. Kalen screamed not in pain, but transformation. Her veins lit up like supernova filaments. Symbols spiraled across her skin, forming a circular sigil on her abdomen. Marcus, she cried. He turned, running to her as the building began to shake. What's happening to me? I think you're choosing. She looked up at him, tears streaking down her cheeks. And then, the light from her body blasted outward, knocking Zara back, disintegrating the wall behind them. In the flash, Marcus saw a second heartbeat flicker in the sigil glowing across her skin. She was no longer just a vessel. She was a mother. Outside, the station exploded in a storm of white flame, sending debris skyward. From orbit, the Terran cruiser watching the planet registered a spike in psionic activity. Sir, we've lost signal from the clone and the traitor. And the hybrid? Unconfirmed. But there's a new reading, something we've never seen before. In the jungle below, buried in rubble and roots, Marcus crawled toward Kalen's body. She was unconscious, but breathing, and in her arms, her hands still wrapped protectively around her belly. The sigil still pulsed. The storm had passed, but the jungle remained restless. Kalen limped beside Marcus through the dense underbrush, her breath ragged, one arm protectively curled around her abdomen. Every few steps, she felt a new pulsy rhythm that wasn't hers alone. The sigil on her skin still glowed faintly under her collarbone, pulsing in sync with something inside her. They had walked for hours, avoiding drone patrols, avoiding betrayal. Their destination, an old smuggler's corridor on the edge of the forbidden sector. If they made it across the border field, a rogue Terran ship loyal to Marcus's old contacts could get them off-world. As they neared the ravine where the signal beacon lay hidden, Kaylin collapsed. "Marcus!" He caught her just before she hit the ground, lowering her gently into the ferns. "It's okay. You're okay." "No, I'm not," she gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "I'm not supposed to feel this much. This connection." Her fingertips trembled over her belly. "It's not just a child, it's awake." Marcus knelt beside her, jaw clenched. "We'll get through this, you and me." But Kylan shook her head, tears threatening to fall. "You don't understand. I can hear it, not with words but with thought, emotion, memory. It's not like us." "Is it dangerous?" Marcus asked softly. Kaylin looked at him, terrified. "It doesn't want to survive. It wants to return." "Return where?" "To something that doesn't exist anymore." She touched her temple. "It remembers a world that was destroyed before it was born." Suddenly movement. A voice behind them. "You don't have to run anymore." Marcus whipped around, rifle raised, and froze. It was Captain Lyra Juno, formerly his commanding officer, his mentor, his friend, and the woman who had signed his last transfer order. "Stand down," she said, hands raised. "How did you find us?" Marcus growled. "I didn't have to. You used my clearance codes to access the relay station. They triggered a dead beacon." She took a cautious step closer. "I came alone. No fleet, no trackers, just me, and an offer." Kaylin struggled to rise. "Why should we trust you?" Lyra's voice was steady, honest. "Because if I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have seen me coming." She knelt, placing a small data crystal between them. "This contains the last known override to Project Unison. If you use it, you can sever the Empire's genetic claim on the child." "Why give us this?" Marcus asked. Lyra looked at him, eyes soft. "Because I served that Empire once. I believed in unity through order. But what they created isn't order, it's enslavement. And you," she turned to Kaylin, "are not their weapon." Kaylin touched the data crystal. The moment she did, the sigil on her chest surged. And then, it happened. She saw, not with her eyes but with her mind, a vision. She was standing in a chamber of light, stars swirling above her head. In her arms, a child eyes glowing with both human and Valyrian, fire reached up toward the constellations. Behind her, two empires burned. And ahead, a new symbol was forming. Not unison, but redemption. She snapped back to reality, gasping. Marcus caught her again. "What did you see?" "Not war, not survival. Something more. But we have to get off this planet now." Lyra stood. "Then go. The path's clear. My ship is cloaked just beyond the border field. 1 more hour of walking." She handed Marcus a beacon key. "And Marcus, when the time comes, don't let them take what you built. Not even if they offer peace." He nodded once. "We won't." But as Lyra turned to go, Kaylin watched her carefully. There was something off, a slight hesitation, a shadow in her aura. "Marcus." "I know," he whispered. They moved. But just before they disappeared into the jungle, Kaylin looked back one last time and saw Lyra pull a micro-transmitter from her belt. "Target acquired," she whispered into it. "Prepare extraction." Betrayal. Kaylin's eyes burned, not with sorrow, but with clarity. She would not run anymore. Not for empires. Not for commanders. Not even for survival. She would choose the ending. The valley beyond the border field was drenched in a cold blue light. In its center stood a monolithic structure, half buried in obsidian rock. The memory engineer forbidden Valyrian relic, once used to erase identities of war prisoners and overwrite loyalty. It pulsed now, active, humming like a predator, awakening from slumber. Marcus and Kalen approached slowly, guided by the beacon Lyra had given them. "This is a trap," Marcus said, voice low. Kalen's eyes never left the structure. "I know. We can still turn back, find another route, another ship." "There is no other way," she whispered. "If they get to this machine before I do, they'll erase me, or worse, rewrite me." Inside the chamber, everything was alive with shifting glyphs and glowing sigils. The air was thick with psionic static. Kalen stepped forward, drawn to the heart of the machine. In the center hovered a floating consolea crystal womb filled with light and neural strands, pulsing in sync with her heartbeat. And just beyond it stood Lyra, waiting. "You were never supposed to make it this far," Lyra said. "Then why help me?" Kalen demanded. "Because I wanted to see what kind of creature you would become," Lyra replied coldly. "A miracle or a monster?" "I'm not either," Kalen said. "I'm a mother." "Not yet," Lyra said. She tapped a device on her wrist. The memory engine flared, projecting dozens of overlapping timelines across the chamber, each a potential version of Kalen's life. Some ended in death. Some ended in slavery. Only one ended with freedom. "Step into the core," Lyra said. "Erase the war, erase the trauma, erase everything they did to you. You'll be free, and the child won't inherit the pain." Marcus stepped forward. "Or you could kill her right now. Clean, efficient, like your orders probably told you." Lyra's expression darkened. "I believed in unison once, but even the perfect union can't bloom from corrupted roots." "You're wrong," Marcus said. "Pain doesn't make something impure. It makes it real." Kalen stared at the engine. She could feel its power. If she stepped into it, she'd lose everything. Her memories of Marcus, of escape, of love. She'd forget her own name, but the child would be protected. She turned to Marcus, tears in her eyes. "If I do this, I won't remember you." His voice cracked. "But you will still be you, somewhere beneath it all." "Will you remind me?" "Every day," he whispered. "Even if I hate you at first?" "Especially then." Kylan looked down at her trembling hand-silver veins, glowing brighter than ever before. "Then hold me, one last time." Marcus wrapped his arms around her as the room dimmed. They kissed deep and broken, and for 1 second, it felt like the universe paused to witness something holy. And then, she stepped into the light. Flash. Her memories fragmented like shattered glass. Zara. The jungle. The relay station. The child. Marcus. All of it, gone. When the light faded, she collapsed into Marcus's arms. Her eyes searched his face like it was the first time. Who are you?" He smiled sadly, brushing her hair from her face. "I'm someone who promised to protect you, and I always will." She touched her stomach instinctively. The sigil was still there. The child still alive. Later, on board the rogue Terran ship, the Morning Star, Marcus sat beside her bunk. She was asleep, peaceful, unaware of the war, the betrayal, the sacrifice. But alive, and growing inside her, the future. A new species. A new beginning. One that chose its own path. Years later, on a distant colony under twin suns, a child played in the field's silver blue skin, curious brown eyes. She laughed as vines bloomed under her fingertips. Beside her stood a woman, Kaleno, longer a princess, no longer a prisoner. Just a mother. And behind her, Marcus, older now, but still watching with the same quiet devotion. Kalen turned to him one evening and asked, "Do you believe in fate?" Marcus smiled. "Number. Then how did we end up here?" He looked at her. "Because when the world told me you were a weapon, I treated you like a queen." And this time, she remembered. And so, the girl they called a weapon, the girl who wasn't even meant to exist, became something far more powerful than anyone had predicted. Not a princess, not a soldier, not a pawn in a forgotten empire's game. She became a mother, a queen of her own making, born not from bloodlines or titles, but from choice, sacrifice, and love. Marcus didn't save her. She didn't save him. They saved each other against fate, against betrayal, against everything written in their genes. And now, somewhere among the stars, a child grows. Part human, part Valyrian, and entirely new. What comes next? Only the stars know. But if you want to find out what happens when love collides with destiny, when war births peace, and when forgotten souls rise to reshape the galaxy, then subscribe to Alien Chronicles. Because this story is just one of many, and some bonds are stronger than empires. AG.E. Don't forget to like, share, and turn on the bell. The next story might just begin where this one ends.